Welcome to the channel. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about CleanSpark and Bitcoin. We're going to talk about the daily chart, the weekly chart. We'll also take a look at the open options interest for CleanSpark, not for Bitcoin though. And then we'll talk about price targets on both of them, talk about when I'm going to add, when I'm going to trim. We'll have a quick look at some news. I don't think there's too much news out whilst I was away, so we'll talk about some other topics if there's no news available, and we'll take a quick look at what's coming up on the macro calendar. Other than that, you can check out my live portfolio over on eToro. The link for that is in the description down below. I'm just going to check up my portfolio progress for year to date here.
Okay, CleanSpark. Apologies that this didn't come out yesterday. I had a hangover and I'm still a bit hungover today, which is impressive. 3 days later, I just can't drink at my age anymore. I'm past that point in my life. So apologies once again. But this does mean we get to look at the chart and stuff after earnings, and that earnings was a little bit of drama. So we'll talk about that in the news section as well. So I marked on here all my adds and trims. Price today is probably going to open close to this red line here at kind of 1340. I don't know if we're going to have more sell-off. My feeling is that retail is very disheartened after the earnings call, so we could get more of a sell-off. If we do get a more substantial sell-off, I might look in my portfolio and see if there's anything that I don't have super high conviction in, so I can rotate capital into this position, because I'm still very bullish on this, and we'll talk about that in the news section as well. Nothing really has fundamentally changed about my thoughts on this company. It's just the short interest is still an issue, and it's just tedious. But to the upside, again, the levels haven't really changed in the last few weeks. So the upside is going to be the 1640 level, then the 18, and then 20. So I don't think I'm going to be trimming out until we get to kind of 20. I was going to trim out lower, but price is just staying so low. I think when we do pop, it's going to be quite violent when the shorts do start to cover. There was the expectation that could happen on earnings, but there really hasn't been anything to scare the shorts into covering. So that's a bit disappointing. I think that's one of the main reasons retail's quite disheartened. Short interest is getting short volume is getting quite high on this one. The RSI is kind of neutral, so it's plenty of room to run in either direction. We are above the bull market band, so I do like that. And we've got support from this volume shelf here as well at kind of 12.11. So that should offer some good support. But if we fall lower, then probably this blue line here, and then getting lower is going to be this $9 area. Honestly, I'd be shocked to see it get that low, but we'll take a look at the options market as well, and we'll see what the big boys are thinking on that one. MACDX Plus, I think the moving averages are going to start looking like they want to pinch together on the open today, but we'll have to wait and see. There really hasn't been a substantial amount of buying on this one, and flow's just kind of meh as well, which is how I would summarize the earnings call. Price targets on this one, I always talk about my Bitcoin targets. My Bitcoin targets have changed. I was at kind of 120 to 240, but now I'm leaning more to the higher end on that. We'll talk about that when we look at the Bitcoin chart. But with Bitcoin at roughly 100k, I would have expected CleanSparks to be about $50 now. So it's still massively undervalued in my opinion. So I think there's a bunch of upside coming on. The short pressure on this one's just keeping a lid on that. But we'll have to wait and see how long it takes for them to cover. On the weekly chart, again, we have the short-term cup and handle, which is great, but we have a monster cup and handle forming here now as well. It's absolutely beast. Did I move that last time? No. Was it this one? Cup and handle, yeah. So the cup and handle target on this one is $43, so that gets us pretty on par with what I would expect. So I think when we break out the neckline, probably around here, it's going to move quite quickly up there. And then we also have a smaller cup and handle here on the daily chart. So we're doubling up on the cup and handles here, and it could be quite a rewarding move in the long term. There's potential for even an additional cup and handle coming here, a much bigger one, but I think we'll run out of time on a run up for that one unless we had some absolutely volcanic moves, which could happen, but I don't know. RSI is kind of neutral. MACDX Plus, it is positive, but again, we're struggling to get some separation on these moving averages. The flow as well, it's peaking up a little bit, but I expect that to start dropping again after today.
Sorry if my audio was a bit weird in the other one. I realised I forgot to plug in my microphone, and I also forgot to use my key light, so I'm a bit in the dark. But again, I'm blaming my hangover for all of this. So let's just have a look at the options market, see what we're thinking. So obviously we had earnings yesterday, but this is where things currently are. We've got some support at kind of 14, but price is going to open below that. So the next kind of large support there will be 12, which is not ideal, I get, but might actually try and buy some more around those levels. And resistance is still at 15. Most of the strike volume's sitting around there. So it looks like we're heading to the lower end of the expected move after earnings, unless retail suddenly changes their mind and wants to buy loads of it at the open, which I don't really see is happening. Next week, currently the big boys, we have the resistance still at 15 kicking in here. Plenty of support underneath as well, so the market makers can buy a bunch, and the largest kind of price area is $19, moving to year end, 3rd of January. Price is looking pretty bullish on this one. We do have the lower targets, but as it's only just been earnings, I expect price might jiggle around a bit in some of these dates. But in fact, we won't go the year out, because then I think my initial expectation was the peak of Bitcoin's run will be in kind of April, May. I do think it could run later this year though, but we'll have to wait and see. But I think most of my positions will be phasing out by then. So CleanSpark news then, we've got to talk about earnings, because we don't really listen to the CleanSpark earnings to get the actual, EPS and stuff. We sort of can figure that out. They give us very regular updates on what they're doing. So there's been no shocks there. The shocks really have come from, we've had a lot of comments from shorts saying shorts are going to get burned. So there's almost been kind of like that expectation for a little bit of excitement. Something big's coming. There's going to be a big announcement. And then we had the earnings, and really there wasn't anything on there that was exciting. I mean, the only thing that was a little bit interesting really was the digital asset management team proposition, but they didn't really provide any details on that. And it wasn't until later in the Q&A that someone asked them about it. And really it was quite a vague answer. They were going to look at covered calls and providing liquidity for the ETFs. So nothing's really changed. Even their long-term plan hadn't really changed. They're still aiming for 37 exahash by year end, and then 50 exahash by end of 2025. So nothing's really changed, which I guess is kind of a good thing, but also a bad thing, because there's been a lot of worry from retail regarding the short interest that we're seeing in this one. So I think even Short said it was about a third of the current float, which is interesting because also institutions are buying a lot. So it's going to be the hedge funds and the arbitrage play that's actually putting a lot of short pressure on this one. The good news is, though, when the shorts do cover, that means they have to buy back the stock, which gives a lot of buying pressure. So in the short term, it's a case of how are we going to convince those shorts to cover. So there's a couple of ways that can happen that people were expecting CleanSpark to do. They were expecting them to announce a convertible notes offering, probably very low interest, maybe even 0 to like 1% or something like that. But that would have removed the arbitrage play from the situation. So the shorts that are involved in that would start to cover, and then that would create a cascade effect in the other ones. Then they could also do puts against themselves or something like that, but that was a bit here or there. But they've been very clear in this call that they've not taken the convertible notes off the table. They have taken, what I think they've been very clear saying if they did it, they would not use it to buy Bitcoin. They would use it to build out infrastructure and stuff like that. But either way, it was a bit of a non-answer that they gave. They sort of said they're open to it, but nothing had been done for sure. Also, shorts as well put on this one about discussing record-breaking annual results, and that's great. They were record-breaking, but there was no energy. There was no like, "Ooh, this is so exciting!" So for any retail listening to it, they just got really disheartened. And then as the call went on, it was a bit of a snooze fest. But then all the analysts were just asking questions about stuff that's already been talked about in the beginning bit, and I don't know if it's because it was just so boring they didn't listen, or they just were being typical analysts, not paying attention anyway. What else did I want to talk about? Oh, they did mention they could potentially do something with Coinbase again, so there could be a non-dilutive line of credit there. Now that I think would also be a good idea to consider. I think the main thing is the dilution strategy is really wearing thin with investors, even though it's been very accretive to the company. I think now the market's moved on to convertible note offerings. There's kind of the expectation that you don't need to dilute shareholders as much. There's other ways you can do this. So they could do the credit line with Coinbase. They could do the convertible notes offering. They could they could roll out the digital asset management team and use some of that yield to cover stuff, but I think we're a long way off seeing that scaled up. But the fact that they're talking about that makes me feel confident that they're going to hold on to a fair amount of their stack, which is what I want in this company. Obviously, a lot of people are now going to be comparing them to Iron, which I like that company as well, but they don't hodl the same. I mean, I don't think they hodl anything anymore, but it's a very different company to CleanSpark. CleanSpark wants to be the best miner and they want to hold it. And then obviously we can compare that to Mara. They do have the best hodl, but they are much less efficient at mining. So there's those three companies, which I do own all of them. They're kind of competing in slightly different ways. So all in all, big picture, fundamentally nothing changed during these earnings. They just kind of reiterated what their plan was. They gave us a couple of extra nuggets, but there was no excitement. There wasn't anything that was going to burn the shorts. So I think the only thing we can do now is they either put out some kind of statement later on, or they just wait for the price of Bitcoin to move up. And when that does, the shorts will start covering because they'll probably want to move net long in the arbitrage play. So moving on to what's driving CleanSpark, we've got Bitcoin. I have lifted my kind of targets to 240 to 280. That's quite a big move from 120 to 240. The tailwinds for Bitcoin right now are just crazy. They are crazy. I think when even before 2025, I think we're going to have another quite large move to the upside. That said, the technicals could get us anywhere between 175 and 300k. I don't want to be putting my targets that high. I think mostly I'm going to start rolling out of this at about 200k and start dumping my proxies. Bitcoin's it's going to be violent, and a lot of the stuff I'm exposed to is super volatile. So I want to de-risk as price moves up. So on the chart, again, I think we're easily going to be getting over this orange line before the end of the year. I think we could potentially be completing this measured move at 126 over the next few months. We're building out a nice volume shelf here, a nice base. When we do pop, I think it's going to go. We'll probably hit ahead on this one and bounce under it a little bit, or we go over it and we have a nice pullback. Either way, I think we're going to be launching quite quickly up to the next level there. So that's going to look very nice. My portfolio will be very happy. The RSI, it's got a lot of room to the upside now. With this chop, it's enabled that to cool off a little bit, so there's no bearish divergence now. That's kind of gone away. Excellent. We did have a couple of overbought signals on the MACDX Plus, but the more we chop, the better that's going to be at fading those out. But I mean, institutions have just gobbled this one up and flows stayed very high. I don't think that's going to change. We can see the numbers the ETFs are putting up, and all the news that countries are starting to want to buy this and start mining, and a lot of countries are changing the law to support this and stuff. So it's going to be a wild ride, and I am totally here for it. On the weekly though, just make this a bit smaller. So we can see the Fibonacci levels that we're kind of looking at for the run up on this cycle. We've got kind of 200k, then 280, but 240. I've been looking at that level for a while. I don't know why. I'm just very attracted to 240. It's a bit of a gut feeling, but sometimes the gut is not right. But I definitely think we're going to be getting up towards this area on this one by the end of it. That said, my initial expectation was for the peak to be kind of the April-May area. I think it's going to be later this cycle. So I think we could hit my lower targets, kind of 240 in this area. And then we make a move higher to 300. But I probably wouldn't want to be holding it past these areas. But, things change. This cycle, I think, is going to be slightly different to the rest. So I can't base my thesis on historically what was happening because legislation that's changed so massively. It's going to be a little bit different. I think the drop in Bitcoin is going to be smaller than it previously has as well. I mean, it's still going to give a lot of face melting action, and a lot of people will be fearful of this. But I think I'm going to start rebuying things a little bit earlier. I'll just keep an eye on that. But I don't really have a set plan with that. I'm just going to follow the price action on this one. Economic data for yesterday then. All looks pretty good. Manufacturing is higher than forecast in most of its metrics. All of them. Nice. No, that's pretty nice to see manufacturing having little upticks. Hopefully that continues and we can see manufacturing get to a place of strength again, get that trade balance in a better situation. Some speeches, didn't listen to those. I was far too hungover to listen to those stories. Today, what have we got coming out? Redbook year over year. I mean, that's been okay lately. Logistics manager index. Nothing exciting there. Economic optimism index can sometimes give us a good beat on what the market's doing. More speeches. No, won't listen to those. The jolts, I think, are probably going to be the more important number for the market. We're expecting a little bit lower than previous read on both of those. I mean, but it's not the most important jobs data, really. It just gives us a little bit of a better picture on what's happening. So it's quits and openings. Tomorrow, we've got more mortgage data. We've got services data, which I always think is one of the most important drivers. And that's been doing pretty well lately. I think services normally ramps up towards Christmas with seasonality and stuff as well. So wouldn't be too surprised with that one. ADP employment change, I like that one. That's the private sector. See what they're doing. So yeah, that one will. I like that one. It's really hard to massage those numbers with adjustments, but we'll see more services data again. So I think the more exciting data is coming on Wednesday. Definitely a Fed chair speech. That's going to be important. See what he's feeling. Could go either way. I don't really know what to expect with the Fed at the moment. It's a bit of a fine line between appearing to be too political and then just listening to the data. But I mean, there's a lot of stuff up in the air. We don't know how the tariffs are really going to shake out. So it depends if they stick with we're listening to the data, or if they're going to try and front run anything. But hopefully they just react to the data, because front running typically doesn't go well for the Fed. That's a wrap. If you enjoyed this content, give it a like, share with your mum, your nan, your dad, your dog, and I will see you tomorrow for Tesla Tuesday.